Hello, and welcome to the Learn to Code podcast here at 1 Month. My name's Chris. This week on the podcast, we're going to answer the question, why are MBAs learning to code? Over the past few years at Columbia Business School, where myself and my co-founder Mattan Griffel teach, we've noticed that more than half of students are learning to code in some ways, whether learning Python, which is the most popular language now, SQL for databases, or taking a digital literacy course, which is the course that I teach. So in this episode, myself and Mattan come together and we're going to chat about why it's so important that people who are interested in starting businesses or working at C-level positions, accountants, finance, while these business school students are interested in coding, why that is an important skill. We're also going to look at some success stories of what they are doing with it once they get out of the course, as well as some tips and tricks for you if you're interested in learning Python for business. What does that mean? Where do you get started? We're going to talk about all that in this episode. This is my conversation with Mattan Griffel on why MBAs are learning to code. Welcome, Mattan. How's it going?
Hi, Chris.
I'm so happy to have you back on.
Me too. I'm happy to be here.
Today we're going to talk about your specialty, Python for MBAs.
Yep.
You teach at Columbia Business School.
Yep.
Tell me about that. Why are business school students learning Python?
Oh, that's a really interesting question, actually. So this class was created about 3 years ago. Before that, the idea that they would teach MBAs coding was like totally a foreign concept. Like, why would an MBA ever have to learn how to code? There are software engineers who do that. But there's a few factors. First of all, they started seeing MBAs are not necessarily going to work at investment banks or in finance or consulting anymore. Like, a lot of them were graduating and they wanted to work in tech or at startups or start their own companies. So like Google, Amazon, Facebook, Microsoft, these companies started to be bigger hires of MBA graduates, and especially in the area of like product and product management and making, product decisions. So at these companies like Facebook, for example, where it's a tech company, they want everyone coming in to at least have some understanding of technology. So what they started to see was like, when Amazon or Facebook hires an MBA, they would almost inevitably have to train them in Python or in SQL or in something, right? And so you'd have, the students would be graduating trying to find jobs and see job descriptions where it would be like, even though it's like a business analyst or a strategy role or whatever they were hiring for, they would want them to know how to code, right? It would just be like, it started as this just little line item. So the graduating students and the people joining the workforce would say, hey, I wish that we had learned this in school. Like, I just spent all this money getting an MBA, and now I have to spend more money to learn about coding, right? So they started to realize that, and then they reached out, asked me to create this class, and it's become one of the most popular. It's an elective. It's not part of the core, but it's become one of the most popular classes there. So this semester, we've got 250 students learning Python, and then another 150 with some overlap learning SQL.
Wow. I mean, how many students are in business school?
There's like 550 per class. So like
nearly half.
Yeah, something like that.
Are learning this.
Yeah, nearly half of them now are graduating knowing how to code, which is it creates an interesting dynamic because it means, if you're not one of those people, but you're going into a workforce where other people have learned this stuff, then you're at a disadvantage.
Yeah. So do you find that what kind of jobs do you find that your students are going for? You mentioned business analysts, a few of these things. What?
Yeah, a lot of analyst roles, even like sort of financial analyst roles. See, the idea is not that these students are going to go on and actually be software engineers. It happens occasionally in like 1 or 2% of the cases. People decide, I really like this. I'm going to want to be a software developer. More realistically, you have someone whose job used to be like, maybe you would use Excel to do something, but if you know Python and you can do it faster and better, then people use Python instead. So it can be like certainly analyst roles, but also even if you're in product roles, like you're a product manager or like even a product marketer, knowing about technology and like so that you can talk to other developers is really useful. So that you can, make decisions about what you should build into the product, what sort of features you should build, and things like that. And even now, I'm starting to talk to people in like operations or like finance roles, like accounting. You would never think that accounting would become like coding related, but it is actually.
Wow. So take me into that, because business school is really hard to get into.
Yeah.
And it's very expensive.
Yeah.
So what would I expect to see if I showed up and got through all that to be in your course? Like what would I actually learn with Python?
So so in a business school, typically what they have is there's like this core, right? And so the first semester you get in, you're learning the basics of marketing, accounting, finance. You're learning.
Everybody takes this.
Right. Everyone takes the core. You've got statistics and analysis, because like we recognize statistics is pretty important. It affects a lot of different things. So you're going to learn it, right? But for most of those classes right now, the assumption is if you're going to do any kind of like work with data or do any kind of analysis, you're using Excel. Right. So in the statistics class, you're using Excel. In the finance class, you use Excel. Marketing, there might be some Excel in terms of that's the form of the data. You might be, playing around with it or whatever. So at the moment, students are, going through the core, and then in their elective time, they're choosing to learn Python or they're choosing to learn SQL, when they want to learn how to code. But more and more what's happening is people are realizing that this is going to be important, so they decide to take the class earlier, and then there's all these further classes that start to build on it. So now you've got students who are learning Python like in their first year, and then they're learning how to do data analysis with Python, or they're learning how to do the same kind of financial modeling that they did before in Excel, but in Python, which is like significantly more powerful. And the funny thing about it, and this I was kind of shocked when I realized this, is the same professors who are like teaching the finance classes are actually using Python on their own when they're doing their own work, like they're doing research, they're running calculations, they're evaluating companies or running models.
But they're teaching Excel
they're teaching Excel in the classroom. Oh. And because they don't even do the work in Excel, they constantly have to refresh themselves on how do I do this in Excel so they can teach the students that. But that's not even how people do it in the real world. Right?
Yeah.
And these people, finance professors they never studied Python. They never learned how to code. They figured it out because it was just a thing that's how the industry evolved.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
But it's a funny disconnect right now. We're in the middle of a shift. I would say give it a few years and you're going to start to see the tools that are being taught in business schools are going to evolve, and you're going to see a lot more coding.
This is really interesting, this idea of Excel being the way to run a business, and then Python kind of like evolving into using Python for a lot of use cases. Yeah. Can you help me understand, if I look at Excel versus Python, why is one stronger for certain applications, or when would I use one or the other? Yeah,
great question. So you're using Excel and you're working with data, and Excel is a perfectly good tool for certain kind of data or certain kind of tasks that you're doing, right? If you've got a relatively limited amount of data, right? Let's even up to hundreds of thousands of rows of data potentially, right? Everything that's pretty small, like you can do everything you want in Excel. And I see people do some pretty advanced stuff in Excel. Like if you've ever looked at a model that investment banker creates in Excel, it's pretty complicated. And in fact, they're doing some technical stuff in Excel that is more complicated than things I do in Python. I'm like amazed by it, right? But they don't consider it to be coding.
And they're like, just because it sounds a little abstract, still like a model for banks or this kind of thing. Like, what does that mean? Is it like breaking down finances?
Yeah.
Or what specifically is that?
Yeah. So a lot of what they're doing is like, let's say that you have you work in finance and you're considering whether to buy a company. Like if you're in private equity, that's what these large private equity firms do, is they look at companies and they decide, is this company undervalued? Can I buy it, and can I make it more valuable?
Okay, this is very business school right now. Right?
This is very business school. Exactly, right? Can I buy, or let's say it's a public company, and you're like, should we buy stock in this company or something like that, right?
Okay.
That's very financy specific.
Very finance kind of question.
So we'll go into that example. When they're evaluating the company, they are looking at all of their accounting, right? They're looking at all the statements to see, okay, what's the profit and loss? Where are you spending money? All this stuff. And then they're also collecting all sorts of other data about that company. They're doing as much research as possible. And they've got at this point like dozens of Excel files keeping track of all this data, right? How much money are they spending? How many employees do they have? What's their product look like as many different things they can measure as possible. And it's all connected together because what you're trying to do then is your model essentially is trying to make a prediction about the future. So you're saying if the last 3 years worth of data looks like this, can we make an estimated guess about what's going to happen in the next 3 years?
Like if we see a trend, if things are growing,
exactly,
percentages are going up here, there.
Yeah. And it gets advanced because you're not just doing at the high level, like how much money is this company going to make, but like what's going to happen to, the office expense, right? What's going to happen to this, the cost of software as the number of users grows. And so it gets quite intricate, and these things are all like linked together. So you're doing that in Excel, but Excel is a really good tool. It's kind of this abstraction of like, what was it called? Lotus 1-2-3, I believe, which is like in the 80s that was first invented.
I've seen it, yeah.
I've never even worked with it, but but it's a really good interface for doing this stuff, but it's really not good at certain things. Like the most obvious example is just, certain amounts of data, right? We live in like a big data world now. Right? Meaning there's all this data that's available, which used to not be available because we're starting to track it because more things are happening online and are being digitally tracked. We don't understand the data. We're not analyzing the data, but it's available. And the more you're able to track stuff, the larger the data sets become. So, it used to be that you'd have an Excel file with like, let's say the price of a company's stock every day for the last 6 years. That's not a huge amount of data. Now you can track it on a minute-by-minute basis, on a second-by-second basis, right? Now you're talking about potentially files with billions or trillions of rows, right? That level of data or like that amount of customers. Like Walmart, for example, has a database that's so large that if you tried to sort it, it would never finish in like the heat death existence of the universe sense. Like it's just impossible. That's the kind of data. I looked it up because in my database class, I was like, I wonder what the biggest database is. And I was like Quora Googling, and it was like, yeah, don't be stupid to try to like sort Walmart's data set because it'll just never finish.
Wow.
So much data, right? Yeah. So like, and then you go to, data.gov is this great government initiative where they put all of these data sets online, like healthcare data, environmental data, like you name it. If you're interested, educational data, manufacturing, whatever, you can download these Excel files and you can play with the data yourself and, figure out some pretty interesting things. But don't try to open it in Excel because you're talking about massive amounts of data. So that's just the first obvious example. Like working with that data in Excel is just not possible. It'll crash. It'll like load forever and then crash. Whereas you can basically do the Excel stuff, but in Python, and Python has no problem. Millions of rows, billions of rows, trillions of rows, not even a question. And you might ask like why that is, and it comes down to just like how the two are built. Like Python is just more computer friendly at the end of the day. But so when you're dealing with huge amounts of data sets, you just can't use Excel as a tool anymore. But even beyond that, if you're doing any kind of like repetitive automatable task, like let's say you do something every week that you could do in your sleep or you could explain to someone else, like you always generate the same report and you email it to someone, right? You can write code to just do that for you.
So right? You can automate this exporting of
totally
data you need.
You can use Python to create PowerPoints for you and then automatically email that to your client, for example. And then the nice thing there is, of course you could like try to outsource some of that, but when you outsource it, you then have to hire someone to check the work of the people that are doing it because there's always like human error. But when you're writing code, if you write it and it works, then it'll keep working. Like, as many times as you get it to work. There's no human error there. The computer program doesn't get tired.
I love that. Yeah. I think you mentioned a book last time called, was it Automate the Boring Stuff?
Yeah, Automate the Boring Stuff.
So that's Python. Kind of, I guess, where that comes from.
Exactly.
You can just write code to do all the steps.
Yeah. So there's like large data sets. You can't really work in Excel. Really repetitive stuff that you would use Python to automate. And then there's really complex stuff that you can't really do using any of the tools that are available. And this is a hard one to explain because we get so used to thinking within the box of the tools that we currently have. So we know how to do everything with the tools we currently have. We don't really know about the things that we can't do with what we currently have, right? Because we just never really think about them. But there's a lot of stuff that, like, if I asked you to try to do it in Excel, you'd be like, no way, I'm never going to do that. It's going to take me forever, right? And like a simple example of this is like, I can give you like a data set and you can figure out the correlation between any two columns of that data pretty easily, right? But let's say I give you a data set and it's got like 100 different columns worth of data. And now I said, okay, come up with all the different possible combinations of those columns. So like every possible set of 3, for example, out of 100, there's like thousands of them. And run that same correlation across all of those and tell me which set of 3 is actually the most highly correlated. You'd be like, I could do that if you gave me like a million years, but it wouldn't be worth it. And that's the kind of thing you can use Python, for example, for, and it would do it in half a second. So these are things that we don't even think of doing in our jobs because it's just not feasible currently, but you can use code to do it for you and to unlock for you.
Wow, that's amazing. That's super exciting.
I think that answers your question, but I got distracted.
You got excited. That was the best answer. Well, I want to hear more about learning Python then. Mm-hmm. So if I'm in the classroom, I know that there's a lot of specific things that I've heard around Python, like Jupyter notebooks and I don't even know, different libraries. Are there certain ones that MBAs or business people, or even just like the person who isn't going to become a developer, should learn first? Like, where do you start if you want to learn Python and you don't want to become a developer? You just want to run a business. You just want to have an option other than Excel.
Yeah. So I think of I teach 3 different applications of Python code in my class, and they're somewhat related, but they're also kind of different. So like the idea is Python is just a language, like any other language that you would speak to talk to people, except it's a language to talk to computers and to tell them how to do certain things, right? So you're unlocking the power of a computer to do something maybe faster than you can. So you need to know a little bit about the language, right? In the same way that you need to know a little bit about like Spanish before you can read an article or talk to someone in Spanish. But you don't want to like focus so much on the grammar and like learning as many words as possible. You want to know enough so that you can then do cool stuff with it.
Like you're going to go to a restaurant, you want to be like, I just want to know how to ask for the bill.
Exactly. Right. You're not going to sit and try to like at a certain point, you're going to stop trying to memorize words and actually go out there into the world and do cool shit with it, because that's why you learned in the first place. Yeah. So I teach enough Python so that I can then show them the cool stuff. Right. So in my class, I'll do 3 classes worth of just the basic Python. And then I focus on 3 different areas. So I focus on data analysis. So showing them how to use Python to basically do what Excel can do, but then go above and beyond. Create really cool looking charts, do data cleaning, do all sorts of different cool stuff in Python. So, and that's one whole area of something you can use Python for, is like data analysis, and that is just a profession is just blowing up in terms of popularity.
Are there any more specific kind of, like, where do you Google to start learning going down that path?
Data analysis. So there's a great book. It's by O'Reilly, and it's called the Data Analysis Handbook, I believe, by Jake Vanderplas. Okay. And it is available totally online for free. So, out of the goodness of his heart, Jake put it online for free, and you can go and you can walk through it, right? So there's data analysis, and then there's APIs. So it stands for Application Programming Interface, but it's really not all that important that you know what it stands for as much as that you know what you can do with it.
APIs is the second use case?
Yes, the second use case outside of data analysis. Okay. And that basically means you can use Python or just code generally to interact with these other websites that other people have built, these other services in some cases. So an example of this would be, you can actually write code that will get the current weather and outside, like where you currently are. That'll tell you what the temperature is. That'll tell you what the forecast is for the next few hours. So your code can go to the web and get that information. You can write code that sends someone a text message using the Twilio API. Right? So Twilio is this company, it's a publicly traded company that built this technology that allows you to write code to send text messages and make phone calls. The weather one, there's plenty of them out there, but one that I teach is called Dark Sky. You've got these APIs that allow you to get updated stock prices, to even make stock trades. Like Robinhood, for example, has an API, and you can write code that'll make your trades for you. So you can do it manually through the app, but you can have code trade for you. And that's like how, these automated funds work, essentially, is they say, when this stock goes past this price and makes this kind of pattern, buy. And then once this happens, sell it. And it'll do thousands of those trades like every minute. And that's how you have code that's basically, replacing the jobs of traders and like people actually doing this stuff manually.
Amazing. So the second use case is using Python. So learning how to write Python script to use these APIs, which is more or less like, I guess, like ways to interact with the real world in live time is what I'm hearing some examples.
Like ways to interact with the internet, basically.
Ways to interact with the internet and then making programmatically automating these kind of things so that you can control life itself.
Yeah. And then the third use case, which is kind of related, is building web scrapers. Okay. So writing Python code that goes to a website and actually searches Google or searches Amazon or looks for flights or whatever and saves the data to like an Excel file, right? Stuff that you might actually, try to do yourself manually, but it would just take time and be kind of annoying every week. And it's not relevant for every job, but sometimes you want to keep track of, say, the price of a product on Amazon, and track it day over day for several months. And there's entire businesses that do this, like the whole flight search businesses where you can search in one place and see where the cheapest airline ticket is. They're basically using scrapers to scrape all these other websites and like aggregate, all these things together. So you can use Python to do that. And that's the third thing I teach.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Those are really great.
Yeah.
Talking about MBAs, and I mean, most people go to business school to, I don't know, I guess get a job or start a career, start a business, or maybe networking is also this thing you hear. Mm-hmm. What types of things are business school students coming out and doing? We talked a little bit about like specific jobs, but do you have any specific people like in your class that you can just kind of paint a picture for me? Like maybe if it's okay to say their name or use a different name, but what's like one person that you've maybe talked with? Yeah, so
my favorite stories are people that go and they kind of like are surprised themselves because they were able to use what they've learned in like their job or in their internship. They do a lot of internships at MBA programs. Like you have the summer internship between your first and second year, and then a lot of times that based on how you do there, you get the job after graduating. So like I had one student named Amrinder who got an internship at Amazon, and he was like a product like marketing manager. And he sent me an email afterwards being like, I didn't expect to do this, but like I was able to write a Python script to like manage our AdWords campaigns. Cause he's like, we had thousands of different AdWords and we were doing this whole thing manually. So I wrote a Python script to like aggregate them and do all this calculation for us. And he's like, and they gave me a job offer, and instead of giving me like a product manager offer, they made me a senior product manager. So like I got a raise above what I ever expected, and I'm now like considered one of the technical people at the company, like a technical product manager basically. And he just like took one Python class, amazing. Right? And obviously I give him a lot of credit for like figuring out how to apply this and do it, and it's not easy what he did. But, there's a really interesting example. I have another friend, Malachi, who ended up working at Facebook and, had to learn SQL, right? And figured it out. He became my TA, right? Created all these SQL examples, and he's now working there, and he's doing all this like database kind of transaction stuff.
So he's using SQL at Facebook to do
exactly
like.
I think he's in product management. Yeah, doing product stuff. And a lot of that's because at these tech companies, they'll have databases with a lot of really valuable data in them. But if you want to get access to the data, it's kind of up to you. They'll be like, here you go. Here's a login. Go grab the data. Because they're not going to waste the time of a developer to help you get the data that you want. It's more, their mentality is more like, well, learn how to write SQL code and go grab the data yourself.
You teach these two courses, Python and SQL, and these are great stories of getting jobs at Facebook, Amazon, these companies. If you only took one, if you had to say, I can only have time to learn one, Python versus SQL, is one better to learn, or do they work together?
They do work together, but I would say learn Python. And the reason why is SQL is really useful if you work at a company that has a database and they're going to give you access to it. That's not most companies. There's sort of a culture around that in some of the larger tech companies where they allow it. But the problem is if you learn SQL and then you join most companies and there's no database, then it's going to be like totally useless and irrelevant for you. Whereas Python, it's one of those tools where you can use it to solve so many different kinds of problems that it doesn't matter, if you have access to a database at the company. Like you can use it to do your data analysis stuff, your web scraping stuff, your automating your tasks kind of stuff. So on the whole, it's more useful, but the two definitely work together, like in many ways. You can use SQL to get data from a database and then use Python to analyze it, for example.
Do they literally plug in together, or is it just you're saying having the skills parallel is all?
No, they can literally plug in together, right? Okay. So you can write Python code and then use SQL library and then have the code basically talk to each other.
Nice.
Yeah.
Sweet. And I want to wind down a little bit, but before we leave this interview, I want to talk about the book that you're working on. Can we talk about that in the podcast? All right, because I know you're still working on it. It's really exciting.
Yeah, it's terrifying.
What's the title of the book?
Right now, it's Python for MBAs.
Python for MBAs, great, great title. Why write a book, Python for MBAs?
So the reason why is my class being more popular than I ever expected within the business school. I don't think anyone ever thought, MBAs are going to be learning how to code. And as I've done this, I've started to see more sort of popularity around this. So Harvard has this famous class called CS50. It's basically their intro to computer science class. And it's taken by all sorts of people. It's 800 students a semester, not just people in computer science. It's all online. It's a great course to watch, talking about free resources. It teaches a bunch of different things, and it's not necessarily where you would go to learn how to code, but it's
pretty low level though, right?
Yeah,
From what I've seen, you wouldn't go there to learn how to apply it to business or to make a website. Yeah. It's more of not the theory, but lower level.
Right. But they recently did a CS50 for MBAs.
Oh, interesting.
And I don't think it's available online, but it's so now Harvard Business School is oh yeah, we're going to do coding. And then I found out Kellogg, right, in Chicago has a Python class within their, I think it's in their marketing department, right? So you're starting to see these different classes pop up at MBA programs across the country. And I just realized there's no book out there for that. There's no textbook. So every class that exists, there's a textbook for it, but there's no textbook here, and there's no standard for how these things are taught. So the hope is, for this book to be that standard, and that so as it becomes more of a thing that's being taught, they use this to create the structure of the classes.
That's so exciting. What's the timeline for the book? When can we expect to?
So I'm going to finish the manuscript and submit it by the end of the year, and then I believe it's somewhere between 6 to 12 months to release it, depending on the launch cycles. So it seems so far out when you're used to the startup world. So sometime 2020.
Wow, that's so exciting. It would be so exciting not only for the Columbia students to have it, but for other business schools to potentially use this, or anybody. It really gives access to the whole world to use Python for business. I love that. That's so powerful.
That's the goal.
Cool. One last thing. I know that you teach with us here at 1 month.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about, the big question I'm always curious about is how is your Columbia course different than the 1 month course?
Yeah. So the 1 month course is, first of all, it's more compact, obviously. At Columbia, it's a 6-week course. It's just 3 hours a week. And you also recognize people are taking other courses, and it kind of has to fit into their schedules and whatever, right? Which is also true for the 1 month course, but in a different way, right? The idea of the 1 month course is you've got a job, right? You've got a busy life. You want to learn something, but you don't have a huge amount of time. So you want to set aside maybe, 15 minutes a day or 30 minutes a day, or maybe an hour or two on the weekend and get through. So the idea is a lot more go at your own pace, right? Watch the videos whenever you want, right? Submit the assignments, but what you get above just picking up a book or just watching normal videos online is you actually get the interactivity of people who are going through it and giving you feedback on your assignments. And so you don't just feel like you're alone going through this process. You actually feel like you're getting help. And so partly the goal is to create a little bit of what that like MBA community model is like, where you have the other students and you have, the community, but for, a fraction of the cost, and for honestly the lives of people who are not gonna quit their jobs and take 2 years and spend $200,000, to get a degree. Maybe they don't need that. Maybe they're just dipping their toe in the water, or they just want to learn something.
Sweet. That's cool.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you, Chris, for having me.
This was so fun.
All right, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Mattan Griffel on why MBAs are learning to code. If you'd like the transcript or any links from this episode, you can find all of that at onemonth.com. You can also find an earlier conversation, a different episode. It was the first episode of this podcast series. It's called How to Learn Python, and that's also with Mattan and I. And you can find that on our website at onemonth.com or wherever you found this podcast. So that's there. If you'd like to learn to code with Mattan and myself, also at onemonth.com, we have the best first month of learning Python. So check that out. If you have any questions about that course or this podcast or anything, you can email teachers@onemonth.com. Myself and the 1 Month staff, we are here and happy to help with any questions you have about, even if you don't know where to start coding. Sometimes just knowing where to start is the question, and so let us know. That's why we're here to help. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you enjoy listening to future episodes of the Learn to Code podcast. I'll talk to you later.